I had spent years building my little kingdom in the clouds. My penthouse wasn't just a home. It was proof that I could rise above the suffocating expectations of my family, that I could carve out a life that belonged solely to me. Every marble countertop, every golden fixture, every delicate piece of art I had chosen reflected my taste, my effort, my independence. It was mine in a way that no one could take, I thought. But on the morning of my sister's wedding, my sense of ownership crumbled like a house of cards. "Darling," my mother began, her voice as sweet as honey but edged with steel. We were thinking the penthouse would be perfect for the wedding. I froze mid-step, holding a tray of champagne glasses, trying to understand if she had just said what I thought she said. "You mean you want me to hand over my home?" I asked, disbelief thick in my throat. "Not hand over per se," she said, brushing imaginary crumbs off her blouse, "just for the wedding, a little loan to your sister." I could feel my blood pressure spike. "A little loan," I echoed, my voice sharper now. "This is my home, my life. I worked for every inch of it. And now, because it's convenient for you, I'm supposed to just give it away?" Her smile faltered slightly, but she recovered instantly. "We've sacrificed for you, dear. Surely this is the least you could do for your sister. Don't you want the wedding to be perfect?" I shook my head, fury and disbelief twisting inside me. I had been careful, independent, responsible. Yet here they were, leveraging every ounce of guilt and obligation they could. My father chimed in, his voice calm but loaded with expectation. "Think of the family, son. It's tradition. Honor your being difficult. Difficult." That word stuck in my throat. I had always been difficult. When I refused their plans for my life, when I followed my own path, when I demanded boundaries, they called me selfish, ungrateful, stubborn. And now, they wanted my sanctuary as collateral for their convenience. "You can't be serious," I said, my hands trembling despite myself. "This isn't tradition. This is theft. You want to exploit the one thing I've built for myself." My mother's eyes glinted, a spark of old cunning there. "You'll understand when you're older. Families do what they must. You'll see your duty." The words hit me like a physical blow. Duty, obligation, love masquerading as control. I remembered all the times they had demanded, manipulated, and expected without gratitude. The birthdays I had sacrificed for them, the nights I had stayed up covering their mistakes, and now my penthouse, my dream, was theirs to wield as they pleased. "I can't," I whispered almost to myself. I won't." Their faces tightened. Shock flickered in my father's eyes, quickly masked by irritation. "You'll regret this," he said, his tone low, a threat wrapped in civility. Regret. They didn't understand that I had been regretting my own compliance for years. Every compromise, every sacrifice, every expectation I had met to appease them had been a chain, and finally, I was breaking free. I walked to the window and looked out at the city sprawled beneath me. The skyline was a reminder of every step I had taken, every obstacle I had overcome. And as the morning sun glittered off the glass towers, I made a decision. I would not yield, not now. Not ever. Still, a pang of sorrow gnawed at me. My sister was getting married. A day that should have been full of joy was already tinged with bitterness. But this was not just about a penthouse. This was about identity, respect, and boundaries. I realized then that standing up for myself might cost me more than I wanted to pay love, approval, peace, but I would rather lose their favor than lose myself. I turned back to face them. "I can't give it to you," I said firmly, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "This penthouse isn't just a space. It's my life and no one, not you, not anyone gets to take that from me." Silence filled the room. Their faces were masks of disbelief and fury, but I didn't flinch. For the first time, I felt the quiet thrill of defiance, of autonomy. I was alone in my stand, but I was not defeated, and that, I realized with a shiver, was only the beginning. The day of my sister's wedding arrived like a bright, unforgiving spotlight. Outside, the sun bathed the city in gold, and birds sang as if nothing in the world could be wrong. Inside, the tension was suffocating. I had refused my parents' demands, and now every glance, every whisper in the reception hall seemed to carry judgment. I had arrived early, my hands trembling slightly as I stepped into the venue. The decorations were exquisite, the flowers a cascade of blush and ivory. My sister looked radiant, a vision of happiness I wanted to share. But the sight only deepened the ache of betrayal. She deserved joy, not the shadow of our family's greed. From the corner of my eye I saw them, my parents hovering like vultures. Their smiles were tight, rehearsed, false. "You're being so stubborn, dear," my mother whispered to a relative, loud enough for me to hear. "After all we've done, how can you refuse?" I gritted my teeth and moved past them, greeting cousins and friends with a forced calm. Each compliment they gave me was laced with thinly veiled judgment. My father intercepted me near the champagne table, his tone polite, but every word was a weapon. "Think of your sister," he said. "This day is about family. Your refusal makes everything difficult." "Difficult," I repeated silently, tasting the bitterness in the word. It had always been the tool they used to control me. I looked at him, my expression firm. "I've thought of her. That's why I won't let you take what's mine. A wedding doesn't justify theft." He frowned, clearly not expecting resistance, and walked away with a tight-lipped smile. The subtle tension in the room was palpable. Conversations stalled when I entered a room, and whispers rippled through the guests like invisible currents. I could feel the eyes of my relatives burning into me, some curious, some judgmental, some sympathetic but unsure. I retreated to a quiet corner, trying to breathe. My sister approached me, her dress glittering in the light, eyes wide with worry. "Are they bothering you?" she asked softly. "They're being themselves," I replied, forcing a calm smile. "Don't worry about me. Today is your day. Just enjoy it." Her hands trembled as she clutched mine. "I hate that this is even happening," she whispered. "I wanted everyone to be happy together." "I know," I said, squeezing her hand. "I know." I glanced toward the grand entrance where my parents were now speaking to the wedding planner, their voices low but urgent, gesturing repeatedly toward my penthouse. My chest tightened. They were relentless. It was then that I noticed her grandmother. She had arrived quietly, dressed in understated elegance, moving through the crowd with the serenity of someone who saw everything but spoke little. Her eyes met mine for a brief moment, and I felt a shiver of reassurance. She knew. She had always known. Throughout the ceremony, I could feel the subtle machinations of my parents. Every so often, a relative would lean over and murmur, "Are you sure you shouldn't help with the penthouse? Or it's only a few hours, really." Each question was a tiny dagger meant to fracture my resolve, yet I held steady, determined to protect what was mine. During the speeches, my father took a pointed detour from congratulating my sister to singling me out, praising my sister's generosity while casting me as obstinate, selfish. The room shifted uncomfortably. Some guests glanced at me with sympathy, others with curiosity, and a few with silent judgment. I clenched my fists under the table, my jaw tight, but my grandmother's quiet presence nearby anchored me. By the time dinner began, the tension was almost unbearable. My parents whispered among themselves, their faces tight, while my sister tried to enjoy the moment, her laughter tinged with unease. I realized then that this wedding had become a battleground, my refusal turning a joyful day into a subtle war of wills. And yet, amidst the whispered criticisms and forced smiles, I caught my grandmother's gaze again. That tiny, knowing smile she gave me spoke volumes. She had seen the injustice, she understood the betrayal, and somewhere deep inside, I sensed that this was far from over. The wedding continued, the music playing, the champagne flowing, but a storm of quiet tension hovered above us. My parents' manipulation had failed to break me, but it had made everyone aware of the underlying family fractures. And in that awareness, I began to feel the first flickers of hope. Someone else in the family had noticed too. Someone who could turn the tide. The reception had settled into a fragile rhythm by the evening. Guests laughed, clinked glasses, and danced, but beneath the surface, the tension simmered like molten metal. My parents, frustrated by my refusal to hand over my penthouse, had begun to withdraw into their own whispers, plotting how to regain control without appearing overtly cruel. Yet one presence remained calm, almost untouchable grandmother. She had been watching from across the room, seated in a corner where her sharp eyes could take in every interaction. The quiet authority in her posture made it impossible for anyone to ignore her when she chose to speak. And tonight I sensed she had chosen. "May I have everyone's attention?" she said suddenly, standing from her chair. The room stilled, even the music faltered, as though waiting for her to continue. Her voice was soft, yet it carried a weight that made my parents stiffen. All eyes turned toward her. "I hear a lot of talk about generosity," she continued, looking directly at my parents and duty, "about family obligations and what should or should not be done. But I think it's important that we remember one very simple truth. Generosity cannot be forced, love cannot be demanded, respect cannot be coerced." The silence in the room deepened. I could see the flush of anger rising on my mother's face, and my father's jaw tightened. This was already more public than they had expected. Grandmother paused, letting the words hang in the air. "Some people mistake obligation for virtue," she said, her eyes now on me, "but that is a dangerous misunderstanding. The heart knows when it gives willingly, and it knows when it is being used. True generosity comes from freedom, not compulsion." A murmur ran through the guests. Heads nodded subtly, some curious, some shocked. My parents' expressions flickered between outrage and disbelief. They had never been publicly confronted like this. Not by me, certainly not by her. Then she reached into her handbag and pulled out a small stack of documents, placing them on the nearest table with deliberate care. "I believe it's only fair that everyone sees what has been happening behind the scenes," she said. The room leaned in instinctively. "It seems there have been repeated requests, arguments, and manipulations regarding a certain penthouse, and attempts to coerce the rightful owner into surrendering it." She paused, letting the accusations sink in. "But the truth cannot be hidden. These documents, letters, messages, even bank statements show a pattern of expectation, coercion, and a disregard for personal boundaries, and they show clearly that the owner of the penthouse has every right to refuse." Gasps rippled through the room. I saw my parents blanch. They were speechless, unable to dispute what was now laid bare. Some relatives whispered to each other, shaking their heads. My mother opened her mouth, but the words caught in her throat. My father's face turned red, a mixture of anger and humiliation. Grandmother's gaze softened, and she looked at me. "And to the one who has been forced to defend what is rightfully theirs, I say this, your courage is to be admired. You have stood firm, not out of spite, but out of principle. That is something worth celebrating." Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes. Relief, vindication, and a strange warmth mingled in my chest. I realized in that moment that the battle was over, not with vengeance or anger, but with undeniable truth. She turned back to the room, addressing everyone now. "Let this be a lesson. Respect must be earned through trust and love, not through fear and manipulation. And sometimes the wisest among us must intervene not to punish, but to reveal what has been hidden." The room was silent, the atmosphere heavy with awe and realization. My parents were mortified. For the first time, their greed and manipulation were visible to everyone they knew. Their demands, once veiled as familial duty, had been stripped bare. I approached grandmother, my voice trembling. "Thank you, I don't know how to," she smiled. A gentle, triumphant smile that carried decades of wisdom. "You didn't need me to fight for you. You needed someone to make the world see what you already knew, and now they do." For the first time that day, I felt free. Not just free from their demands, but free from the fear that standing up for myself would isolate me from my family. The truth had a power all its own, and in that power, justice was quietly served, and in that quiet, I realized something else. Revenge didn't always need to be loud or cruel. Sometimes the sweetest revenge was the one that left the guilty exposed and powerless, while those who had endured injustice emerged stronger, unshaken, and whole. The wedding continued, but it had changed. The air was lighter now, tinged with relief and a quiet reverence. My parents sat stiffly at the head table, their whispers and attempts at manipulation silenced by the grandmother's intervention. They had tried to frame me as selfish, to shame me into surrendering my penthouse, but the truth had stripped them of authority. Their power, once assumed, evaporated. Guests who had initially cast curious or judgmental glances now approached me with warmth, subtle nods, and quiet congratulations. Some whispered words of admiration for my firmness, others offered condolences for having endured such blatant manipulation. I felt a strange mixture of pride and sorrow, pride in standing my ground, sorrow for the family fractures that had been so clearly exposed. My sister found me again, her face radiant despite the tension. "You didn't deserve any of that," she said softly. "I'm sorry they treated you like that." I smiled, squeezing her hand. "You don't have to apologize. You're allowed to enjoy your day. That's what matters." She shook her head. "No, it shouldn't have been like this. You worked so hard, and they tried to take it away from you. I hate that I didn't see it sooner. You did what you could," I said gently. But someone had to stand up, and as you can see, I glanced toward grandmother, who was seated gracefully nearby, watching the family with a quiet, knowing satisfaction. "We're in good hands." Grandmother caught my eye and beckoned me over with a subtle tilt of her head. I walked to her side, feeling a mix of awe and gratitude. She reached out, taking my hand in hers. "You've grown stronger today," she said. "Not because I intervened, but because you were willing to be honest about your boundaries. Courage like that cannot be taken from anyone." I felt a lump in my throat. "Thank you," I whispered. "I don't think I could have done it without you, even if you only needed to speak once." She smiled, a mixture of pride and mischief. "Sometimes the smallest voice can carry the heaviest weight. Let them remember that. Let them know that greed and manipulation have consequences, even if those consequences are quiet, subtle, and unavoidable." Across the room, I noticed my parents exchanging glances. The shame in their expressions was palpable. My mother's cheeks were flushed, and my father avoided eye contact entirely. Their carefully constructed authority had been dismantled in front of everyone. Their attempts to control me had backfired spectacularly, leaving them humiliated yet unable to confront it directly. It was poetic justice, sweet in its simplicity. They had demanded my penthouse for the sake of a wedding, trying to cloak their selfishness in tradition and obligation. Yet the truth, revealed calmly, cleverly, and undeniably, had silenced them. The victory wasn't loud or vengeful, but it was absolute. As the evening drew to a close, I finally allowed myself a moment to breathe. I stepped onto the balcony of the wedding venue, gazing out at the city lights sparkling below, each one a reminder of the life I had fought for and the independence I had preserved. The penthouse, my sanctuary, remained mine. Not just a physical space, but a symbol of strength, resolve, and self-respect. My grandmother joined me, her presence comforting yet commanding. "You see," she said softly, "justice doesn't always need to roar. Sometimes it whispers, and the world listens. Sometimes it simply allows the truth to shine so brightly that it cannot be ignored. That is the kind of power you've inherited." I nodded, a warmth spreading through me. "I think I understand now," I said. "Revenge isn't about hurting others. It's about protecting what's right, standing tall, and letting the world see who's truly in the wrong." She smiled, squeezing my hand before releasing it. "Exactly, and remember this, never doubt your worth, never allow others to exploit your generosity, and never forget that courage paired with wisdom is unstoppable." As I returned to the reception hall, I noticed subtle shifts in the room. Guests now approached my parents with quiet caution, while I was met with respect. My sister's wedding, once a battlefield of subtle power struggles, had transformed into a celebration of love, honesty, and integrity. That night, I realized something profound. The sweetest revenge is never cruel. It's the quiet vindication that comes when truth and justice align, when those who try to manipulate are exposed, and when the one who stands firm emerges unbroken, proud, and fully seen. And in that realization, I felt a sense of peace and triumph that no one could take away. Not my parents, not circumstance, and certainly not anyone else. The penthouse remained mine, yes, but even more than that, my dignity, my independence, and my heart were untouchable. For the first time in years, I felt truly free.